It started with a phone call that was never supposed to happen. A former insider, long removed from royal circles, quietly revealed details that threatened to rewrite years of public perception. At the center of it all stood Meghan, Harry, and a secret that had allegedly remained hidden from the prince himself. What began as a private recollection soon exploded into a revelation that could shake the foundations of one of the monarchy's most controversial chapters. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The call, according to those following the story closely, did not arrive like a loud public attack. It came quietly, almost carefully, from someone who had once stood close enough to the machinery of image, reputation, and royal ambition to understand how stories are built before the world ever hears them. Meghan's former publicist, after years of silence, reportedly began speaking about a chapter that many believed had already been settled. But this was not simply another claim about palace tension or family distance. This was different, because the suggestion was not only that Meghan had secrets before the wedding, but that Harry may have entered the most important decision of his life without knowing the full picture. That single possibility changed the entire tone of the conversation. Suddenly, old questions returned with sharper edges. What did Harry truly know before he stood beside Meghan in front of the world? What was carefully explained to him, and what was left buried beneath charm, timing, and emotional urgency? Royal commentators began circling the revelation with caution, because even a whisper like this could reopen wounds the monarchy had spent years trying to contain. Media insiders reportedly rushed to compare timelines, revisit old interviews, and examine the public image Meghan carried into royal life. Supporters dismissed the claims as another attempt to drag the couple back into controversy, while critics argued that the silence itself felt suspicious. And inside palace circles, according to reports, the reaction was not panic, but watchfulness, the cold, practiced watchfulness of an institution that understands how one loose thread can pull apart an entire royal narrative. Yet the most haunting question was not why the publicist spoke. It was why now. After all the interviews, all the accusations, all the public pain, why would someone from Meghan's old world decide this was the moment to step forward? Perhaps it was conscience. Perhaps it was frustration. Or perhaps, as some insiders suggest, the truth had been waiting for the right crack in the story to finally break through. And once that crack appeared, it did not lead backward into silence. It led straight into the carefully managed beginning of Meghan's rise. But the publicist's revelation was only the beginning, because the story reportedly traced back to Meghan's earliest days of building her public image. Long before royal titles and palace gates, there was a carefully managed image, one shaped through interviews, connections, and strategic positioning. According to those familiar with the process, what the world saw may have been only part of a much larger story. Meghan's rise was never presented as an accident. It was framed as the journey of a determined woman carving her place in entertainment, charity, and influence, one careful step at a time. Behind that rise, public relations played a quiet but powerful role, shaping how she was introduced, how she was remembered, and how every opportunity could become another polished piece of a larger identity. Former colleagues have reportedly described those years as intense, disciplined, and highly aware of perception, where nothing about public image felt casual for long. The publicist, according to emerging claims, allegedly saw decisions being made behind the curtain, choices about tone, access, connections, and which parts of Meghan's story should be pushed forward, while others remained softer, quieter, almost untouched. And then came Harry. His arrival did not simply add romance to the story, it changed the stakes completely. Suddenly, the image that had been built for entertainment circles was being pulled toward one of the oldest institutions in the world. What once helped create familiarity now had to survive royal inspection. What once felt ambitious now had to look effortless. What once belonged to celebrity culture was moving toward palace life, duty, protocol, and scrutiny from every corner of the globe. That is where the former publicist's revelation becomes so dangerous. Because if certain parts of Meghan's past were rarely discussed, then the question becomes painfully simple. Did Harry receive the full version, or only the version prepared for him? Reports suggest that as the relationship deepened, The prince became more emotionally invested, more protective, and less open to doubt from those outside the circle he trusted. To supporters, this was love. To critics, it was the beginning of isolation. And somewhere between those two versions sits the mystery that now refuses to disappear. The Publicist's alleged account does not merely challenge Meghan's image, it challenges the foundation on which Harry made his choice. A prince raised inside a fortress of tradition may have believed he was stepping into a private love story, but insiders now suggest he may also have been stepping into a carefully guarded narrative. And if that narrative had missing pieces, the consequences were not small. They followed him into engagement, into marriage, into royal conflict, and eventually into exile from the life he once knew. As the relationship accelerated toward global headlines, insiders claim certain conversations became increasingly difficult to avoid. According to the former publicist, the most shocking part wasn't what happened, it was what reportedly never happened. Critical conversations that many assumed had taken place may never have occurred at all. That claim struck at the heart of the entire story because it suggested Harry may not have walked into the relationship with the complete understanding many believed he had. Reports surrounding the publicist's account describe a period filled with careful silences, guarded explanations, and information that was allegedly treated as too sensitive to place directly in front of the prince before the engagement became unstoppable. People close to Meghan, according to these claims, had raised concerns in private, not necessarily as enemies, not always with malice, but with the uneasy instinct of those who sensed that a royal marriage would place every buried detail under unforgiving pressure. Yet as Harry grew more committed, those warnings reportedly became harder to deliver. He was no longer just a prince listening to advisors. He was a man defending the woman he loved, and that emotional shift changed the entire balance of power around him. Traditional royal guidance, once a steady force in his life, allegedly began to feel like interference. Questions that might once have been handled calmly became personal. Doubts became threats. Caution became betrayal. And inside that tightening circle, the publicist's claim lands like a blade. Was Harry protected from painful information, or was he kept away from it? The difference is enormous. One suggests care, the other suggests control. As the engagement drew closer, the stakes grew brutal. Every conversation carried the weight of history, family, duty, and public expectation. If certain details were known by associates but never fully explained to Harry, then the future Duke of Sussex may have been moving toward marriage while surrounded by half-answers and polished reassurance. That possibility has fueled a fierce public debate. Some argue Harry was misinformed, pulled into a narrative shaped by emotion and loyalty. Others believe he was simply uninformed because he did not want to hear anything that challenged the love story he had chosen to defend. Either way, the result was the same. Warning signs, according to insiders, allegedly passed by unnoticed or were dismissed before they could become serious. Obstacles, and once a royal engagement becomes public, everything changes. The private world shrinks, the machinery begins, the family adjusts, the press closes in. Suddenly, what could once be questioned becomes something everyone is expected to support. That is why this revelation feels so explosive. It is not only about Meghan's past or Harry's trust, it is about whether the monarchy witnessed a storm forming and still allowed the prince to step deeper into it, unaware of how much would eventually be lost. Yet the deeper the publicist went into the story, the more attention shifted toward the people who allegedly tried to raise concerns. Every major royal controversy seems to have one recurring theme: warnings that were ignored until it was too late. According to emerging accounts, this story may have followed the same pattern. Friends, advisors, and people moving quietly around the edges of Meghan's old world reportedly sensed that the relationship was moving faster than the questions surrounding it. Some concerns were not dramatic at first. They were practical, cautious, even uncomfortable. Could a woman shaped by celebrity culture truly adjust to the harsh demands of royal duty? Could Harry, already wounded by a year of public pressure, separate love from protection long enough to hear difficult truths? And most importantly, were the people around him brave enough to speak before the engagement turned private doubts into a national celebration? According to claims now being revisited, The answer may be far more complicated than anyone wanted to admit. Behind closed doors, disagreements allegedly began to grow between those who believed Meghan deserved full support and those who feared the palace was overlooking warning signs in the rush toward history. The divide became sharper with every headline. Supporters saw a modern love story, a fresh chapter for the monarchy, a chance to soften old traditions. Skeptics saw risk, speed, and a growing wall around Harry that made honest advice harder to deliver. Reports suggest that some concerns were raised, but never reached him directly in their full force. Others may have been softened, delayed, or dismissed because no one wanted to be accused of standing in the way of his happiness. That silence, if true, may have been one of the most costly mistakes of all. Because once the engagement announcement arrived, everything changed. The question was no longer whether Harry should move forward. The question became how quickly the royal machine could prepare the world for Meghan. The palace shifted into public support. Commentators softened their language. Critics were pushed to the margins, and anyone still carrying doubts faced a brutal reality. The train had already left the station. Yet beneath the public excitement, insiders reportedly grew nervous. They understood that royal life is not sustained by charm alone. It is built on discipline, obedience to protocol, emotional restraint, and a willingness to disappear into duty when the crown requires it. If those values were not fully accepted before the wedding, the future would not simply be difficult, it would become explosive. The former publicist's alleged account now suggests that there were moments when clarity might have changed everything. A harder conversation, a fuller explanation, a warning delivered without fear. But those moments passed, one by one, until the romance became a royal commitment, and the commitment became impossible to question without causing damage. But once wedding preparations began, events reportedly moved so quickly that any remaining doubts became nearly impossible to address. There comes a point in every royal story when speculation turns into reality. For Harry and Meghan, that moment arrived beneath global attention, where millions watched history unfold without knowing the questions still lingering behind palace walls. The wedding did more than join two people. It turned a private relationship into a royal fact, sealed before the world and absorbed into an institution older than any modern romance. Every doubt that had once moved quietly through private conversations now had to compete with ceremony, expectation, and the powerful emotion of a prince who appeared completely committed to the life ahead. Harry was no longer simply defending a relationship. He was defending a future, a wife, a new identity, and perhaps even the idea that he had finally found peace after years of personal pain. That made every unanswered question more dangerous. Because once the public celebration began, the space for honesty narrowed. The former publicist, according to the wider claims now being discussed, reportedly watched from a distance as the carefully built image entered a world that was far less forgiving than entertainment or media circles. In celebrity culture, a public image can be adjusted, softened, or relaunched. Inside the monarchy, however, image is tied to duty, hierarchy, service, and silence. There is no easy reset when the crown itself becomes involved. Palace insiders allegedly understood this better than anyone, and yet the machine moved forward. Staff adjusted. Schedules changed. Protocol teams prepared. Commentators praised the modern moment. And the palace tried to make room for a figure who was suddenly not just famous, but royal. Still, beneath the global fascination, unresolved concerns reportedly remained like pressure beneath stone. Questions about compatibility with royal life did not vanish, simply because the wedding had happened. Tensions that may have existed before the vows did not dissolve under public applause. If anything, they became heavier, because now every misstep would reflect not only on Meghan and Harry, but on the entire House of Windsor. That is where the story begins to darken. The seeds of future conflict may already have been planted in those early choices: the speed, the silence, the protective circle around Harry, the reluctance to confront uncomfortable details before they became impossible to contain. What looked to millions like a triumphant new chapter may also, according to critics, have been the moment when private concerns were locked inside the royal system with no clear path out. Success and suffering stood side by side. The world saw celebration, Others claim the palace saw warning signs, and Harry, caught between love and legacy, seemed determined to believe the future could still be controlled. Years later, however, the consequences of those early decisions would begin surfacing in ways few could have predicted. The departure from royal duties shocked the world, but according to some observers, the roots of that decision may stretch back further than most people realize. What the public came to know as Megxit did not appear overnight like a sudden break in royal discipline. It arrived after years of pressure, suspicion, emotional distance, and unanswered questions that had been quietly gathering strength beneath the surface. To millions, it looked like Harry and Meghan were simply walking away from palace life. But to those now revisiting the early chapters of their relationship, the exit may have been the final result of tensions that began long before the official announcement. Public scrutiny intensified with brutal speed. Every interview, every gesture, every absence, every royal appearance became part of a larger argument about loyalty, freedom, duty, and blame. Inside the family, relationships reportedly deteriorated as trust became harder to protect. Harry's bond with William grew strained. Palace staff faced growing pressure. Meghan's critics became louder, while her supporters argued that the institution had failed her. But the former publicist's alleged account adds another darker layer to the story. If warning signs existed before the wedding, and if certain details were never fully discussed, then the collapse that followed begins to look less like a shocking rupture and more like a tragedy that had been quietly forming from the start. Former associates reportedly began revisiting old events with new eyes, connecting moments that once seemed separate. A difficult conversation here, a protective response there, a growing circle of silence around Harry, a public image that had been carefully shaped before royal life placed it under impossible examination. Over time, media narratives shifted. At first, the story was romance, then it became rebellion, then it became accusation, then exile, and now, with the Publicist's comments returning attention to the beginning, the debate has become even more explosive. Who truly understood what was happening, and who allowed the situation to move forward anyway? Some argue Harry and Meghan were pushed out by a cold institution unwilling to change. Others believe the couple brought unresolved tensions into the palace and then blamed the monarchy when those tensions erupted. But between those two extremes sits a harder, more painful question about responsibility. Was Harry misled, protected, isolated, or simply determined not to hear what might threaten the future he wanted? The Publicist reportedly sees patterns that now seem clearer with distance, patterns of image, control, emotion, and missed opportunities. And once those patterns are placed beside the royal split, the entire story feels less like a single decision and more like a chain reaction that no one stopped in time. And that is precisely why the Publicist's recent comments have attracted such extraordinary attention. Perhaps the biggest mystery isn't the revelation itself, it's the timing. After years of silence, why would someone with insider knowledge choose this exact moment to come forward? That question now hangs over the entire story like a locked door waiting to be forced open. The former publicist's alleged comments did not land in an empty room. They arrived after years of interviews, accusations, memoirs, documentaries, palace denials, public sympathy, public anger, and a royal family still struggling to repair the damage left behind. So why now? Some observers believe the answer may be simple. The historical record is being challenged, and those who once stayed silent no longer want one version of events to stand alone. Others suspect the timing is tied to renewed attention on Harry and Meghan's past, as the world continues to revisit the early decisions that led from a celebrated wedding to a devastating royal split. Every new claim pulls the story back to the beginning, forcing people to ask whether the warning signs were there before the palace, before the titles, before the exit, and before the public battles that followed. Royal commentators have reacted carefully, because the claim is delicate. It touches not only Meghan's reputation, but Harry's judgment, the palace's internal caution, and the painful question of whether the prince was ever given a complete view of the woman he was preparing to marry. Supporters of Meghan see the publicist's remarks as another attempt to reopen old wounds and punish a woman who left the royal system. critics see them as a possible missing piece, one that explains why so many tensions seem to explode so quickly after the marriage. And between those two camps, the debate has become fierce. Credibility is now part of the storm. Why did the publicist wait? What was gained by speaking? What details can be verified? And what remains locked inside private memories? In royal stories, timing is rarely innocent. A revelation can be confession, correction, revenge, or warning. Sometimes it is all four at once. That is why the palace, according to reports, treats these moments with quiet seriousness. Not every rumor becomes history, but every rumor has the power to reopen a door the institution wanted sealed. The global reaction proves how much interest still surrounds Harry and Meghan's journey. Years after stepping back, their story remains unfinished in the public mind, because each new account suggests there may still be hidden rooms inside the narrative. And if this publicist truly saw pieces of the story before the world did, then the timing may not just be about the past. It may be about what is coming next. But beyond the headlines and debates lies a much larger question: what does this mean for Harry himself? If the publicist's account proves accurate, the story may not simply be about Meghan or the monarchy. It may ultimately be about trust, perception, and whether one of the world's most famous princes ever had access to the complete picture. That is what gives this revelation its lasting weight. Not the noise around it, not the endless arguments between supporters and critics, but the painful possibility that Harry, a prince raised under the pressure of duty and grief, may have built his future on a version of events that others now claim was incomplete. If true, the secret would not only reshape how people view Meghan's rise into royal life, it would also cast a shadow over Harry's public image as a man who fought fiercely for love, but may not have fully understood the battlefield beneath his feet. Royal watchers remain divided. Some see this as another chapter in a campaign to question Meghan's motives, while others believe it explains the deep fracture that followed. The speed of the romance, the distance from advisors, the breakdown with William, and the painful collapse of trust inside the House of Windsor. Yet the most unsettling part is that the monarchy itself still cannot escape the question. How much did the palace know? How much did it ignore? And how often did silence win over truth because no one wanted to risk stopping a royal love story that had already captured the world? That is why this chapter continues to burn. It touches the deepest fear inside any institution built on loyalty, that perception can become stronger than reality, and once trust breaks, even titles cannot repair it. Harry and Meghan's journey has already become one of the most controversial royal stories of the modern age, moving from celebration to confrontation, from promise to exile, from public sympathy to endless debate. But this alleged revelation adds something colder. It suggests that the beginning may still hold answers to the ending. Every interview, every accusation, every family wound may now be viewed through the lens of what was said, what was hidden, and what Harry may never have been told. Perhaps the full truth will remain locked inside private memories, protected by loyalty, pride, fear, or legal caution. Perhaps the public will only ever receive fragments. But fragments can still change history when they arrive at the right moment. And now, because one former insider has reportedly chosen to speak, the story has shifted again. The question is no longer only whether Meghan changed the monarchy. It is whether the monarchy, Harry, and the world were ever shown the whole story before everything changed forever. And while the full truth may never be publicly confirmed, the former publicist's revelation has ensured that this chapter of royal history is far from over. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.